What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another video. It is that time of year where the AFL season is just about a week away. It's March, it's time for the AFL season to come back. And in this video, I am of course going to be going through my 2025 AFL official ladder predictions. I will also be giving my premiers. So yeah, stay tuned and let's get into the video. So as we always do, let's start off with the bottom of the ladder, and coming in at 18th, a pretty obvious one. A lot of other creators have them in this spot, and it's hard to see them not finishing here, to be honest. And I am, of course, talking about the Richmond Tigers. Now, this is going to be another rebuilding year for the Tigers, obviously. They're just too young and inexperienced to not finish in that 18th spot. Yeah, you could make an argument for maybe a North or a West Coast, but other than that, I don't think anyone else is really going to be finishing here. They're just too young. They've got some really good young guys that have played in the preseason, but I think it's just going to be another long year for Richmond. I think they'll only be getting like 2 wins maybe at most. They're just too young and inexperienced, and over the next couple of years when they get more playing time, they will of course improve up the ladder. But I just can't see them finishing out of 18th, to be honest. So yeah, we're going to start off with Richmond in an 18th. Moving on to 17th now. Now, this club probably should be improving because they've been down the bottom for quite a few years, and I am talking about North Melbourne. Now, of course, every year I am usually high on North Melbourne to improve, and I definitely could see them improving, but it's just the same old story every year for the past, 5 years now. They've just been stuck in that same spot, and to be honest, I think it's going to happen again. I just don't see them really getting any more than 5 wins. I know they probably should be getting at least around that 6 to 7 win mark, but they're just still a young team, and they probably would need to take more time to develop the list. They've brought in Luke Davies-Uniacke last year, and they've got some good recruits and some good draftees, but their backline as well is horrible. I remember last year for like the first 10 rounds they had given up I think it was 100 in every game. Zach Fisher, still a very young player in that backline. Along with Luke Davies-Uniacke. So, yeah, look, I think it's definitely going to need to take some improving their backline if they do want to start winning a few more games. And, look, I just can't see them improving, to be honest. I think that they're a very young list, and it's going to take a couple more years for them to really start jumping up the ladder. And, yeah, I could probably see them finishing higher, but for now, I'm just going to have them in at 17th because it seems to be the same old story with North every year. So, moving on to 16th now, I do have the Melbourne Demons. Now, last year, the Demons really did fail. Obviously, their season was kind of derailed by injuries, but towards the middle, towards the back half of the season, they had some really massive losses, which I think could definitely occur again. Now, maybe I do have them a bit low. I believe they do have like the third or second easiest fixture, and when, to be honest, even with their injuries back, I think that is a bit too easy on them. Why should they have that easy fixture? And then that probably does gives you questions on why I do have them in 16th, but I don't know. They always just seem to lack when they work together as a team. They just never seem to be able to do that after 2021. There's a lot of selfishness. Cozzy Pickett looks like he's going to leave somewhere over west, probably to Freo, and look, Christian Petrarca, obviously coming off his injury. It's going to be a weird season for Melbourne, but I just don't see them improving, to be honest. I know they could definitely have a bounce back here, especially with their easy fixture, but I think, I definitely think there are just some better teams in the comp this year, some younger ones that might even come up to play with them when they come versus them, and maybe even beat them as well. I definitely think that the D's were able to take advantage of those more younger and easier teams, but I don't think that's going to be the case this year. They could definitely finish higher, but it's just such a crammed ladder, so I'm going to have the D's in at 16th. On to 15th now, I do have the West Coast Eagles to round out the bottom 4. Now, I really do like what the Eagles did in the off-season. Now, obviously they gave up their pick 3, which turned into Jagger Smith, which went to Carlton, and a lot of people found that controversial, but I think it was the right move for West Coast. They added Liam Baker and Matthew Always, who can play in the forward line, which isn't really what the Eagles need because they do have Oscar Allen and Jake Waterman up there, but they can also play in the midfield as well, which will certainly help the Eagles. So I think this is a win-win for the Eagles personally, and look, I definitely think if they can snag half of their home games like they did last year, they definitely got, I think it was 4 home wins. So if they can maybe win an extra couple more of those, I definitely think that they will improve. I think they can at least get 7 wins this season. And if I'm an Eagles supporter, I'd be looking forward to this season, to be honest. I think they're future's pretty bright. Obviously got that young talent like Harley Reid and Jake Waterman, the forward line. Could he have another big year like 2023? Oscar Allen might also improve this year after a bit more of a disappointing season coming off injuries. And I think that the Eagles, they'll still be in that bottom 4 range, but I do think they are going to finish higher than the D's this season, which is a bit of a controversial take, but I do think that they will stay in that bottom 4, but I do have them in at 15th. Moving on to 14th spot now. This club could really finish anywhere, maybe as high as like 6 or something, and they probably should be with their young and talented list, but I do have the Gold Coast Suns in at 14th. Now, maybe this is a bit low for the Suns. I just don't know where to put them. Last year, they finished 12th, I believe, and it was a pretty poor season for the Suns because they did that really good homework, but they struggled to get away wins, and I think that this season they certainly will get a few more away wins, but it's just the same old story every season, I feel like, with the Suns. You know, they're always able to get a few wins at home, then just they lack those away wins, or, you know, coming up against the better teams, they always get demolished by, and it always ends around that bottom 4 to that 10th spot, where they always finish to that 12th spot, sorry. Now, they did improve last year a little bit, I felt like, after a disappointing 2023 season finishing in the bottom 4, but I just don't know if they can improve. They really should be, but I do like some teams above them here that I just think are younger, have a bit more experience, and look, I definitely think that they could have a couple more All-Australian players like Toot Miller, some of their young guys like Ballard and that, but I do have them in at 14th, and I don't know, maybe Damien Hardwick can pull them off to the 8. I would love to see it, but I just can never trust Gold Coast, and maybe this is their year, but I'm going to have them in at 14th. Moving on to a similar side like the Gold Coast Suns that probably has similar list in the talent and the side that has some really good players. I do have the Western Bulldogs. Now, the reason why I do have them at this low is I definitely could see them making the 8. The issue is they've really got injured. You know, Jamara Ugle-Hagan, he didn't play any of his preseason games. I don't know what's happened to him. There were also rumours that, yes, in yesterday's game against Hawthorn, the Bont went out with an injury. I think he'll be fine for round 1, but you know, if he's coming off that injury, can he win the Coleman this year? Sorry, not the Coleman. Can he win the Brownlow this year coming off that? I don't know. They traded away some good players in there. They traded away Kennedy. They traded away McRae. So they also shipped a couple of players out for some picks. Now, their young talent is looking really good, like Riley Sanders and a couple of those younger guys. But I just don't know if the Bulldogs can improve to that spot. Obviously, they played Hawthorn in the final last year, which they went out disappointingly. And they finished in 6th spot, but I just don't know. I still think they do lack a bit of consistency, even though they did improve on that towards the back end of last season. So it's going to be a weird season for the Dogs. Maybe they could make the 8. I don't know. It's just a big jumble up in this part of the ladder, as I said. But I think the injuries and the players they traded away, which obviously they kind of need to, might just come back to bite them a bit, and I have them in at 13th place. Coming in at 12th now, I do have a young side. That is the Adelaide Crows. Now, the Crows probably should almost be making the 8, because even though how tough it is to make the 8 with this part of the ladder, like I keep saying, you know, Matthew Nicks, he's been at the helm for almost 7 years now, and look, they've been going through a rebuild, but they've been out of it for a couple of years now. Obviously, 2023 was a bit of a heartbreak with that disallowed goal. Sure, Adelaide fans can remember that really well, and it still gives them nightmares to this day. They should have made the 8. Last year was a bit more of a disappointing season. I don't know, maybe the expectations were too high last year, and they didn't end up making the 8. But this year, I do think they will finish a couple spots higher. Now, they could finish further up, you know, maybe against the likes of the teams like my Saints, maybe even the teams like Collingwood possibly. But I just think their young group will start to play more games, and I think they'll get around that 11 to 12 win mark. But I'm just not sure if they can make the 8. I think, though, if they don't, obviously, and they finish below that 10th spot or something like that, they don't get at least 11 or 12 wins. Do think that is time for Matthew Nicks, and maybe with the predictions that I'm giving here, maybe he will be gone, but I just don't know if Adelaide can really pull it together to make the 8. Maybe next season for Adelaide, and I know they probably shouldn't be making the 8 with their young and talented list like Rankin, Dawson, a couple of those guys. They've got a really good midfield, I rate it, in that forward line. Their defense, though, can still be improved upon. You know, I feel like the only times they are going to hold teams to that lower percentage is then when it when it is at the Adelaide Oval. I feel like, they can play some good defence there, but their backline still needs a bit of work. And Riley Philthorpe's another young guy who's coming through. So they realistically should be making the 8, but I'm just not too sure with Adelaide because it seems to be the same story every season apart from 2017 when they did make the 8. Ever since then, it's just been a massive fall-off, and I think that might continue. Moving on to a side that did make the 8 last year that I do have missing out, my first team, I'm talking about the Carlton Blues. Now, the Blues last year, they were just derailed by injuries, as we know. They ended up getting thrashed in that elimination final against Brisbane, and it wasn't really a good look to finish off the season for the Blues. And the reason I have them this low is simply just because of their players. They're very injury prone. We've already seen their number 3 pick, Jagger Smith, go down with an injury, so that's going to be tough coming into the season. A lot of their players like Curnow, who I also believe is playing off a bit of an injury at the moment. He's missed a couple of preseason games. He's also injured. He's a massive addition to that forward line, winning the Coleman a couple of years ago. But yeah, look, it's certainly going to hurt the Blues, and I just think that maybe their list, it always seems good enough, but they never seem to be able to get it done in the regular season. So, I don't know, I could be wrong on the Blues, but I just think injuries could derail them again. They've already got a couple injured players on their list, and I think that may happen again to the Blues. And every year there is that one side there are quite a few sides that do miss out on the top 8 after making it the year before, and I think the Blues might be a culprit of that. So, I'm going to have the Blues in at 11th. Moving on to a side now that I might have a little bit high, and it might have shocked a few people, but I am talking about the Essendon Bombers now. Essendon, I have them in 10th, and a lot of people are saying they're going to be around that bottom 4 mark, maybe a couple spots higher, but I actually think Essendon will have a pretty decent season. I'm actually a bit more bullish on Essendon than a couple of others are, and the reason being mostly is because I actually don't mind where their list is at right now. I like what they've done in the draft. They've got Kako, who's kicked a couple of good goals against their preseason match against Geelong. In the preseason as well, they have looked good, beating the Bulldogs by 21 and also beating the Cats by 21. So 2 top 8 sides from last year beating them in the preseason. Now, it's only preseason, but the Bombers aren't looking too bad. I do like Carl Langford up forward. Sam Draper, he can also be played in the ruck. I just think that Essendon, similar to last year, will always have that strong start. Then towards the last 6 to 7 weeks of the season, they'll fall away. I think that's going to happen again, maybe, to be honest. Or I think Essendon will finish around that 10th mark. I think they finished 11th. But I'm actually a little bit more bullish on the Bombers than a few other people. And I definitely don't think this list is finals quality. But I do think that they are moving in the right direction and they're a step closer. So I definitely think that Essendon, a couple more drafts around the midfield and they'll improve. But I do have the Bombers in at 10th for now. Next, we move on to 9th. Now, you don't really want to be finishing 9th. Who's that side that's going to miss out on the top 8? I'm going to put Hawthorn in at 9th. Now, the Hawks, listen, they made the 8 last year. They had a really poor start. They were 0-5. They did so well from there on, pretty much. They made the 8, made it all the way to a semi-final against Port Adelaide, unfortunately getting knocked out. So why do I have them out of the 8? Well, in recent years, it's just been shown that young sides that have made the 8 the year before usually fall out the next season or have a bit of a drop-off. I think this is going to happen with Hawthorn, and the main logic being, I just think they're going to be one of those sides that, falls out the 8 and has a rebounds next year. And I had to have at least a few sides out of the 8, so that is my third team out of the 8, so I have changed up the 8 a little bit. I don't think that the Hawks will make it again. I could easily see them making the top 4, but then again, I could easily see them finishing 10th. Sicily, look, they've got some really good guys like the Wizard, Sicily, and D'Ambrosio. A few of those guys are just really young, and they were playing exceptional last year, but I don't know, I'm just expecting that downfall from Hawthorn maybe this year for them to respond and rebound the next year and maybe win a flag, but I just don't know. I think they're still a young side. They could easily make the top 4 like I just said, or they could easily fall out. And I thought to make this video a bit interesting, switch it up a bit, I thought I'd just leave them out of the 8 to have at least 3 sides coming out the 8 because that's how the ladder does work each year. So got Hawthorn in at 9th. Now, that does obviously mean I could have been a bit biased, and I have put my Saints in the 8, And that's where I'm going to be predicting the Saints to finish this year in 8th spot. Now, call me biased all you want, but for the last 2 years doing these predictions, I haven't included the Saints in the 8. I never am usually confident coming into a season. Like, even if we did make the 8 like last year, I didn't think we'd be able to back it up the next year. I just think our list wasn't good enough. But this year, there's just something giving me that confidence. I feel like we're a side that could rebound. A lot of us are saying we're going to be around that bottom 4 mark, around that mid-range mark, similar to Essendon. But I am going to have us in the 8. I genuinely think I am really positive coming into this season. I think a lot of Saints fans are too. And we'll start off, obviously, with our additions. So we'll start off with McRae now. Bringing in McRae to that midfield really does help out. And I feel like it's going to be a vital role just to help out Jack Steele in the midfield. Listen, our forward line isn't where we want it to be at the moment. I believe Max King is questionable for round 1. He's touch and go, which isn't good, and we definitely need him playing for the season because he just got injured last year, and we're actually better when he's not playing, but I think we will need him for 2025. If he can stay fit and healthy, I think that we should be in for a good season. We've drafted well. Our two picks, 7 and 8, Alex Turu and Toby Travaglia in the practice match. By the way, look at Toby Travaglia, that goal to kick the sealer. It was only a practice match, but it was good. So hopefully he can play a couple of games, or should be getting a couple of games throughout the season. I think our depth is good as well with some role players in there, but mostly the younger blokes. We have got Mashido Owens and Nazai Wangley-Miller, a couple of those guys. Mateus Philippou, can he have a breakout season? Although I believe he is sort of on the injury list. And by the way, we've also signed Tom Boyd, who is looking like an absolute demolition of a ruckman, backup ruckman to help with Rowan Marshall. He looked amazing in the preseason. And also, just continuing on with how we played at the back end of last year, sometimes when we moved the ball from our defensive 50 to the forward line, it honestly looked like top 4 football. And I believe we were first transitioning from the D50 to the forward line, which we did also see against Carlton on our little practice match there. But so hopefully if we can continue that, signed Boyd, signed all these guys and drafted well, I definitely think we can make the 8. I'm really positive coming into this season. Hopefully we can pick up where we left off last year, but we just need to get these wins. Again, last year our main issue was towards the start of the season. We had a lot of close losses, and you flip a couple of those and we would have made the 8. So it's going to be tough, but I do think that we can make the 8. Maybe I'm being biased. Let me know in the comments, but I'm going to have the Saints in at 8th. Now moving on to a side that I think might have a slight drop-off. I do have the Cats in at 7th. Now the Cats, I feel like could easily make the top 4 last year. I believe they finished in 3rd. Still think they'll make the 8, but maybe not have as much of a strong season. They have got a few of the older guys out of the door, like Tom Hawkins, and also there. So they've brought in Bailey Smith though, and they have drafted well. Now they are looking pretty good though coming into this season. I can't lie. They've got some good guys like Tanner Bruin. Who else am I talking about? We've got Bailey Smith as well, although he did, I think he's done something with his calf. I don't know, something like that. But they are looking good coming into this season. I just don't know if they can back it up. I still think that their list is still aging, and I never like to write off Geelong. I didn't write them off last year, and hey, they ended up making the 8. They ended up making top 4. I still think they'll be in the race for the 8, but this is the year where I do think they might have a bit of a drop off. Still think they can win a final or 2, but I'm just not too sure. Maybe they'll fall away a bit, but I think Geelong fans should be excited for another season. They'll probably be in that top 4 range again, like always, but I think they might have a bit of a drop-off. I have them in at 7th, and I do think there are a couple sides above them that might just have the edge over them in some games. And look, playing at GMHBA, they should still be another force there, although they did just lose their game to Essendon there. So maybe a few more dropped games at GMHBA this season, maybe, but they should win most of their majority games there. I'm still not sure how they travel well. You know, they don't really travel well to sides like the Gabba. They don't really travel well over to sides like Perth. So, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how the Cats will go in 2025, but I do have them in at 7th. Moving on to 6th now, a side that a lot of people are bullish on in 2025, and I'd say I am kind of as well. I'm talking about the Fremantle Dockers after, well, really ending off their season disappointingly. They did have a lot of injuries towards the back end of 2024. They lost their last 4 games to, let's albeit, I think 3 of them were top 8 sides, 2 of them were top 4 sides. Just that game against Essendon, then when they choked, they shouldn't have lost that. That really costed them. But this year should be a good year for the Dockers. They should be able to break into that top 8. A lot of people are saying they should go all the way into the top 4, top 2. I'm not there yet. I do get that at least their midfield, their backline is one of the best in the comp. But remember, they do have to make the 8 first for me to put them in that top 4. They still didn't make the 8. Now, obviously, they had their injuries like Alex Pearce, Josh Tracy got injured as well, and a couple of other guys got injured towards the back end of the season. I think they should be able to though make the 8. I definitely think they will get around that 15 win mark, and they should be able to finish in 6th. They brought in Shea Bolton, which is really good for them to help out their forward line. Didn't really need to do much in the draft, and they didn't, but I think did bring in the addition of Shea Bolton should be able to get them kicking a few more goals, which was a kind of an issue again in 2025. There were just a few games where they looked really poor and they kind of looked like a bottom 4 side, but at their best, they are definitely top 4. So I definitely think they will make the 8 this year. Don't think they'll make top 4, but I definitely think they should be able to compete with the best of the best and win a few series like last year, win a few of those games. So I have Freo coming in at 6. Moving on to the 5th spot, I'm going to put Sydney. Now, the Swans are obviously, again, another battering in the grand final. It really was disappointing the way they did end off their season. And towards the back end of 2024, for those last 8 to 6 rounds, most of them were losses. You know, they had that 112-point loss to Port Adelaide. They lost a couple of games to my Saints. They lost a few good games towards the back end of the season. And I think that maybe in 2025 we might see a bit more of that. How are they going to respond and go... How are they going to respawn in 2025? I don't know. Now, Brisbane did respawn and win the flag, obviously, in 2025. But that was a bit of a different story. You know, they finished in 5th. They had a really poor start. And I think we could see that with the Swans. Still think they're definitely good enough to make the 8. I have just decided to leave them out of the top 4 just because the last time the side that got battered in the grand final made the top 4 was back in 2020, which... was Geelong. And if you think about it, like, making a grand final is a massive achievement. The last 2 teams standing, and for the last 4 of them, not one of them to be in the top 4. I just don't know if Sydney can do it again, and I definitely think their list is good to go this season. You know, they've got the likes of Logan McDonald, Chad Warner, Isaac Heaney. He's still going up in the forward line. A lot of those guys, they just really banked up wins in 2024. Definitely think they should be able to get around that 15 to 16 mark, kind of like Freo, but I'm not too sure if they'll make the top 4. I don't know how far they can go in finals. Maybe they could defy the odds again like Brisbane last year and go all the way to another premiership, but they do have to get over their grand final hoodoo, and I think the Swans might have a bit of a drop-off in 2025, but I still have them making the 8, coming in at 5th. Okay, so now we are moving into the top 4, and coming in at 4th to round out the top 4 to kick-start it off, I'm going to put Port Adelaide in there. Now, I definitely feel like on paper their list is certainly top 4. For the last couple of years and pretty much over the last few years, the Port Adelaide Football Club have been a pretty good regular season team, but in finals, obviously, that's a different story. They did get battered by the Cats, although they did win that final against Hawthorn. They did get battered the week after against Sydney. I just think they'll be able to respond. Their list is at the right age demographic. You know, they've got the likes of Zach Butters, Connor Rozee, 2 favourites. Well, not favourites, but top contenders for the Brownlow. And when you've got that in your midfield, you've just got to be making it. Look, their forward line's still up there. You know, I definitely think that, you know, Charlie Dixon, Power Pepper and those guys are going to kick quite a few goals up there for the Power. Their backline, though, is the issue. I think that certainly lets them down sometimes. You know, Radigalia playing in the backline just doesn't really do much. And Alia up forward, he can also be in the backline, but I just don't know if he can really do much with Radigalia. So they've got plenty of tools, don't get me wrong, but they need some guys like Callum Wilkie that can take these actual intercept marks to help out their backline, which they didn't really add to in 2025, which does worry me, but I do think they should be able to go maybe even to another grand final. But this is obviously Ken Hinckley's last season. If you've been living under a rock, he has said that this is going to be his last season before he retires up the next season, which probably is the right call, don't get me wrong, but he's a great regular season coach. I have the Power in at 4th. I think they should be able to be there, and I think they should be getting around that 16 win mark as well. So definitely think the Power should make the top 4, but have them in my making them top 4 rounding out the top 4 in 4th. Moving on to a side now that I am always bullish on every season, I'm talking about the GWS Giants. I have them in at 3rd. Now, the Giants, I definitely think can make the top 2 as well, but don't get me wrong, their list is still very good. Although they did lose a couple of players in the off-season, they should be able to back it up. They've got some good guys like Hogan in the forward line, Caddy. Who else have they got? They've got quite a few guys in there that can just do heaps of bits and that. So I think the Giants should be up there contending again. Now, last year they did go out in straight sets in the final series and they lost both of those games. I think they were leading both of those games by over 26 points or something. So to lose both of them was a bit disappointing, especially that Brisbane game at home, choking it. Obviously, Brisbane did win the premiership. That was disappointing. So how are they going to respond in 2025? I think they should just be fine. I'm a bit sceptical, though, of their forward line, their back line. Their midfield's still good, but I don't know. I still think the Giants will be up there. I think they'll make the top 4. I think they'll round out the finals. I think they'll round out the top 8 in 3rd. And I don't know how far they can go in the finals, but I still have them there. Moving on to one of my bigger rises of the video, I do have Collingwood in at 2nd. I'm really bullish on the Pies coming into 2025. I love what they did in the off-season. Not necessarily in the draft, because they literally did nothing in the draft, but the trade period. They brought in Harry Perryman to help out in the midfield. They brought in Dan Houston as well. They also brought in Tim Membry, who's really looked good in the off-season in the practice match against Richmond, who they absolutely thrashed. They won by 83 points, obviously, and he got 4 goals. So I definitely think that Collingwood should be another great offensive team. I think their forward line, even though they don't have many bigs, I think should be good as well. That's why they did bring in Membry. They've got Nick Dacos, and yes, they are the oldest list in the AFL, but sometimes the oldest ones are necessarily the more experienced ones. They're not that old. Like, if you look at their oldest player is Scott Pendlebury, who's like 38 or 39, but the rest of their guys like McStay, which are around the 30 age demographic mark, I definitely think that most of those guys should be able to get wins. I think what they lacked in 2024 was just their ball movement wasn't as good. Their teams found it out, but I think bringing in these guys to the midfield, you can definitely create something there. And I definitely think Collingwood will be bouncing back into the top 4. I don't know, they could have another disappointing season, but I am really bullish on Collingwood for some reason. I honestly could see them finishing first. Like, that's generally just how they are ran as a club. Their fans are going to be turning out to every game at the MCG. They should be another good side in 2025. I'm really liking how Collingwood are going to go. I have them in at 2nd. Now, I really was sceptical about putting this side in first. I'm talking about Brisbane Lions, the Premiers. Now, the reason being that is because the last 2 Premiers in Geelong and Collingwood haven't even made the 8th, so why am I putting Brisbane in at 1? I don't know. Do I think they'll win the Premiership this year? Probably not, to be honest, but I just think they are a good home and away side, a regular season side, and great regular season side, and I think they will be there again. I definitely think that they should be able to make the top 4, but they could easily fall out. Like, their list is slightly getting older, although they still have some good guys in there, like Callum Archie. They did lose Joe Danaher in the off-season, though, so I don't know how that's going to go. Levi Ashcroft looks pretty good as well, like Will Ashcroft's brother. They got in the draft. He's looking really good in his practice match against the Adelaide Crows. I think Brisbane should be able to hopefully back it up for their sake. I don't think they are good enough to go back-to-back. I just think there's too many teams competing, but I do think the Lions will be in at first. But I am sceptical. I definitely could see them. Wouldn't shock me if they missed the 8 with how the recent Premiers have been going in the last couple of years, but I do have Brisbane in at first. So, to round off the video, we will do my awards. So, we'll do the Brownlow and the Coleman. So, as for the Brownlow, I definitely think there are a few guys up there. I think Patrick Cripps, if he has another good season, obviously he polled a crazy amount of votes. I think he polled like over 45 or something. It was crazy. I'm going to go Andrew Brayshaw, though, from the Dockers. I do think that he should be able to have another good season, especially for around that top 4 to top 8 range. I think that for them to need them needing to have a good season, he just needs to be at his best, and I think he will. He looked pretty good last year, but towards those end games, he wasn't as good. But I think if he can stay more consistent, he should be able to win it. So he's my Brownlow for this season. My Coleman, well, I am going to go Jesse Hogan to go back-to-back to win it. There are a few guys that could contend, possibly Jeremy Cameron if the Cats are firing in their forward line like last year. I think he finished like 5th in the Coleman race. Charlie Curno's also up there for the Blues. And Nick Larkley as well could also be another shout, but I do think that Jesse Hogan and the Giants are going to be able to kick quite a few more goals this season. So I'm going to go him for my Coleman medal. And that is going to wrap up this video. If you did enjoy, please do hit the like and subscribe button. We are growing the channel nicely. Let me know if you agree or disagree with my predictions in the comments. Can't wait for the AFL season to start next Thursday. It's going to be great, and I'll see you guys in the next video for my tips.